You want the honors? She's got it. We're recording.
Okay, fantastic.
And while we're catching people in, checking in, I'm going to share my screen, so we'll be ready to jump in.
Terrific. Okay, everybody, welcome to PowerHouse Smarts Education Session this lovely Tuesday morning, or actually it's afternoon already, 1 o'clock. It's hard to believe how time flies. We are here with Daryl Katz, our PowerHouse Smart Advisory Board member, and also Daryl owns his own company, Impact Training Solutions, is CEO and founder. And for years, Daryl has been my go-to source when I want to conduct training for my consulting clients or big groups. He's just awesome. And this is just one of the many PowerHouse Toolbox trainings we've done. And this is a half an hour, really concise, but powerful. And I'm going to turn it over to Daryl now. Daryl, we're thrilled to have you. Thanks for conducting the session yet again.
All right, thank you, Wendy. Just so you know, Wendy is multitasking. She's at O'Hare. She just flew into town and she's like picking up her bags and talking all at the same time. Very impressive. Thanks, Wendy.
Yeah, sure. Well, that's the new era, right, guys? We can do everything. Okay,
So,
I'm going to mute and listen in. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Well, welcome everybody. I see a lot of familiar faces. I see some new faces. I'm pleased that everyone's been able to join us today. And I want to take the time we have and make it something I think will be enjoyable, but to offer some tips that I think you can put to work virtually immediately to help tighten up your email communications. I suspect that you're very good communicators. I know many of you personally, but just a few things to kind of burnish your skills a bit. And in just a second, I'm going to put an email on the screen. When I put that email on the screen, I want you to read it carefully. It's from a guy named Mitch, and Mitch has a message. And when you find the message, send me a text, send me a chat. Send it just to me. Don't ruin it for everybody, but don't send it to everybody. But if you find it, address it to me, Daryl Katz, and tell me what you think Mitch's message is. So if you're ready, when we float over to that email, it should be populating your screen. So see what Mitch is saying and let me know what you think.
And when you are sending Daryl your message, open up the chat box, change the to just to Daryl, and then type in your answer.
Have at it. Okay, I want everybody to stop reading, stop reading. I stopped you at 2 minutes from the time I put the email up. Let me assure you, there is no email on the planet that deserves more than 2 minutes of your time. So if you find yourself reading an email for 2 minutes or more, your time's being wasted. I'm looking at the chat to see a couple of people chimed in to see if anyone found the magic. I think Mitch scatterbrained. A couple of you got pretty close. Let me share with you what Mitch was talking about. Then we'll talk about the email itself. If you look with me, I'm going to highlight it. Well, let me go back. Let me highlight something. Look at the bottom of the email, and I'm going to underscore, I can't meet with you tomorrow at 10. We'll need to reschedule for 2. How many people got that? Show of hands. Some of you did, some of you missed it, some of you are looking for other things. Where is that I just highlighted? It's at the bottom. Now, believe it or not, this is a classic problem with emails when we write emails. I'm going to show you in a second. There's some science behind this about how we think and how we process and how we display data. But we tend to put important things deeper into a memo. And I'm going to challenge you to go back after we're done, look at some of the emails you've received in the past week or so. Pull them up on your screen, print them out if you want, and read them from the bottom paragraph up. I don't mean stand on your head, but read them from the bottom going up. And you may discover that they actually read better when you go in that direction. And then my further challenge is to do that to your own emails and see what you find. You may find that your emails are actually better from the bottom up as well. Before I go deeper into that, let's just play with Mitch for a second, since somebody said Mitch seems scatterbrained. Yeah, absolutely. Feel free to open your mic. What were some other things, or maybe I should say, did anything else bug you about this email? Feel free to share. Anyone?
His capitalization and just up, back and forth.
Yeah. Grossly inappropriate, up and down. We've all talked about the all caps. It's like you're shouting, and there's no consistency. Anything else bug you? Anyone?
He was rambling, in my opinion.
Rattling, hopping from one topic to another.
Correct.
It sounds like he's just all about things that bother him. The whole thing was complaining.
The whole thing was complaining.
And
no
grammar, spelling.
And grammar, bad spelling. So when I custom wrote this for us, and I went out of my way to make it as atrocious as possible, trying to draw upon all the things I've seen in bad emails over time. Let me ask you about the subject line. Go Cubs. What do you think of that? Does it have anything to do with the memo?
I wouldn't open it up.
You wouldn't open it up. Some people would throw it in the trash or trash it immediately. It's amazing that with all the rambling topics that Mitch seems to go to, he never goes to the Cubs. So the subject line has nothing to do with the email. Now, here's a little question for you. Knowing now what Mitch is actually trying to say, his whole email is about, I need to reschedule the meeting. If you were going to write his subject line now knowing what he's after, what would be a good subject line?
Tomorrow's meeting.
Tomorrow's meeting, I like it. Who can be even more specific?
Reschedule meeting.
Be more specific.
Reschedule meeting from 10 to 2.
Okay, you're really getting to the right targets. So let me introduce you to a concept you may or may not know. Have you heard of EOM? EOM, it stands for end of message. Now, you can use EOM if you can write a subject line that says exactly what you want the reader to know. And if you share this with the reader in advance, so picture working with your colleagues, clients you have regular contact with, anyone, even family, if you explain what EOM is, if you can write a subject line that is very specific, I need to schedule today's meeting at 10 till tomorrow at 2 o'clock. EOM in parens maybe. It tells the reader there's nothing else here. It says there is no body to this text. I've just said what I have to say. So if you can be very specific about what you want to put or what message you want to put out there, you can do an EOM as long as your audience knows about it. And think about this for a second. Think about you're coming out of a meeting, you've been tied up on the phone for the last 30 minutes, looking at your phone, looking at your screen, wherever you get your email. And if it was EOM, it's almost like text. It's just like, I need to do this, EOM, I'm done with that one. I need to move this to here, EOM. I've got the file, EOM. If you could have a world of EOMs, you could power through your inbox instantly when it works. And there's sometimes you need to say more. There's sometimes you need to say more, but when you can distill your message into just the essence of what you have to say, think about using EOM as a tool. Maybe we'll come back to this in a second. I want to talk about some of the structure and some of the many loose ends that Mitch has put together, but I want to focus a little bit more on that, putting the topic at the top of your email. So let me share something. If you've had any experience in the newspaper industry, you'll know what this is all about. Reporters are trained when they go out to cover a story. They're trained to make sure the story has the absolute most pertinent, most important facts in the first paragraph. And then the second paragraph, important, but a little less so. The third paragraph, a little less important. The fourth, and so on. Everything gets less and less important. Still important to the story, but less and less data. And here's why they write that way. When they file their story, it goes to their desk editor. Now, the reporter doesn't know how much space is available that day for their story, but the desk editor does. And let's say the reporter writes a 12-paragraph article. The desk editor says, I know, and by the way, if you don't know this, newspapers their size is determined by how many ads they sell. So the desk editor says, that's a great story. It's 12 paragraphs, so I've got room for 5. I don't have time to rewrite this. I got to get this to press. And the desk editor starts chopping from the bottom. And so they know, the desk editor knows that the more I chop, I'm never going to lose the integrity of the story. It'd be nice to have paragraphs 6, 7, 8, and 9, but I only have room for paragraphs 1, 2, 3, and 4. And that still has the essence of the story. The problem is, and that's been around for 250 years in the newspaper industry, the problem is we tend to write, and this is backed up by some science that I've done some research on. We tend to write like we're writing for a TV show. It's like an episode of Law and Order. You know, you watch a show like Law and Order and there's a crime committed and then you don't know who did it and you follow the investigation and then there's the courtroom drama and then in the last 30 seconds, there's some sort of surprise verdict or some new development. They'll go, wow, I didn't see that coming. That's how TV shows are written. They want to build up to a crescendo. And we tend to be wired that way. And we tend to write, we want to hook our audience. We want to do things, let's say, let me get your interest. Let me build up to the big crescendo and boom, here it is. We're going to move the meeting to tomorrow. And this is just a natural tendency that we have when we write, when we speak too, but that's a slightly different topic. So I need you to think about the newspaper reporter when you're writing and say, what is the most important thing I have to tell the reader? What is the thing they care about the most? And when you finish writing your email, and I don't care if it's 2 paragraphs or 16 paragraphs, obviously I want you to proof it. That's where you pick up the typos and all the other errors. But think about, where did I put the most important thing? And unless you're really being diligent, I think you may find it's actually buried a little deeper. So bring it back up to the top. So it's the form. And then ask the question, do I really need the rest of this? Am I drifting into other topics? If so, I should be writing a separate email. Or is this a level of detail that the reader doesn't need to know? Or even, is this a level of detail that if they need to know, they'll get back to me? And then you might say, well, I've got a memo going out and half the people need more data and half the people don't need as much data. You're probably talking about 2 different emails. You want to be very focused on who you're writing to and what's the information they need. So think about the pyramid being upside down. Think about Mitch turning his email upside down. Think about your own emails and how do they look if you read them upside down. See if you see a difference in how they're structured. And definitely think about EOM. It can be the greatest tool ever for streamlining communications. If you and your group, your sphere of influence, the people you communicate with, if you get synced like that and everybody knows what EOM stands for and how to use it, you might be very pleasantly surprised what a difference it makes. Now, I'm going to share a few things about texting, but I want to kind of stop the clock for a second and entertain any questions you have about what we just covered.
I have one question. So at the beginning, when you're first starting to implement an EOM system between you and people you frequently communicate with, do you need to include the acronym and an explanation for future use, or do you make an assumption that people know what that acronym is?
Yeah, great question. I would go ahead and let people know. So I don't think you want to conquer the world in one day, but I would start with some small group of colleagues or clients or people you frequently communicate with and just say that, and call it an experiment if you want, or call it an innovation. Just came out of a workshop and we talked about this, and EOM stands for end of message. And whenever I feel like I've got a very concise message to deliver to you, and I think that says it all, then I'm going to put an EOM at the end of the subject line. That's your signal that there's nothing else there. You don't need to open the email if you don't want. And I think people that said that's great, but they read the EOM, whatever it is, and they say, well, why'd you move that meeting, or why can't we do it this way? Then they can follow up. And if you feel it's going to be a resounding question that people just can't get past, then you're probably not going to have an EOM. You're going to say, I need to justify that. I need to say more about it. But yes, let people know that you're using EOM. Worst case scenario, you use it and someone writes back and says, what the heck's that EOM up there mean? And where's the rest of your note? It didn't come through. But I'd give them a heads up. And I'd start with a smaller group. But I work with some large corporations that use it consistently. And it's just part of their lexicon. So try it out with the small group first. Other questions?
I have a question. Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. I didn't raise my hand. You go first.
Go ahead.
Okay. So would it stand to reason that you would want to use that in terms of filtering your subject search? Like if you just wanted to quickly get all your EOMs in?
Yeah.
Or is that might confuse like your own sphere of organization in your head, because it could be all over the place, right? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. I think at least for some period of time, your EOMs are going to be kind of a specific body of notes. And if you search by EOM, you'll get all your short burst communications. Over time, it might become self-limiting because your topics are going to expand, and then an EOM might have been on any topic and it might not narrow your search down enough. But I think I think we get a sense of people that we have what I call swift communications. Some people just say, I need to know more. I need detail. I need detail. Tell me more. Tell me more. You're not going to use a lot of EOMs with them because they're going to automatically come back and say, anyway, you've got to share more information. But you kind of learn about the people who EOM with you and you EOM with them. So yeah, it might be a good way to do a search. I think after a year's time, the impact might be diminished because EOM could be going in any direction.
Right. All right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Who else had a question?
I did. It's Wendy.
Yeah,
so,
Wendy.
Daryl, what do you do if you've got in the subject line, if you've got a very super urgent message? Is it better to do all caps? I mean, what's the best way to do it?
I know people are tempted to use the all caps to put something provocative to get their attention. I don't think those things work. We live in an environment with a ton of information going back and forth. And I don't think people really pay attention. I think people are diligent enough to go from top to bottom to see what's in their in basket. And I don't know that the all caps or putting the word urgent does that much for it. I think that, and I don't know that EOM, the thing that EOM can do for you is if you're very conscious about using it, you're going to have distilled a message, a phrase, not even a sentence, that I think is going to say a lot. If you've got a critical issue, and if it's a normal email and you just put the top issues or we need to deal with this, but if it's specific to the topic at hand, it's going to say it right there. I think it speaks for itself, that the reader is going to say, wow, I need to look at this, or I need to deal with this. I need to get back to that person. So I'm not a big fan of the all caps. I think it's sort of overblown when it comes to the subject line, but some people like to use it.
Thank you.
Yeah. What other questions can I answer? Then let me kind of pique your interest. I want to shift a little bit to text messages. Uh, text messages are really interesting, and I don't know, we all use them. I know we use them personally. I suspect you're using them from a business standpoint. I think there's some bugaboos that we've got to deal with that you're, I'm sure, aware of, but just a couple things to think about. For instance, in the upper left-hand corner, let me highlight it. I think this person was trying to say you're a diligent teacher, and autocorrect turned it into you're a dump truck. And I think autocorrect, I'm not a fan of in the least, because it sort of has a mind of its own and wants to take over your thought process. Obviously, the way to defend against that is if your system, your texting allows you to turn that off, I say do it. And if not, be a good proofreader to make sure you're not sending out something inappropriate. And I've seen some really weird examples of things that get very benign passages that get turned into very inappropriate passages. The other one to think about is just your typos. You know, we start going with our thumbs and we try to go fast. And I think this was trying to say, meet me at 10 a.m., 10 being spelled out. And it came out meet be at Ben a.m. It gets all garbled and it doesn't do your recipient any good. I'm okay with emojis, but use carefully, judiciously. I think that, you know, a happy face at the end of something, a frustrated face at the end of something, some of those are good. I wouldn't overdo it. I don't think any of you do. I've seen people more in the Generation Y, I think, group and younger that, you know, try to write the whole message out in emojis. So I would just use them carefully. I would give bonus points if you could. There's actually a message in there. It's like happy face pointing at red, something dancers. If you could figure that out, I'd buy you a cup of coffee, but I don't think you will. And obviously it ends with poof. So I did have a client not so long ago. I used a happy face emoji in a very straightforward communication, like, you know, the plan is done, we're ready to start. And the client wrote back and said, I don't like emojis, don't use them again. So I obviously don't use them with that particular client. So from a business standpoint, just, you know, tread lightly and make sure you're not pushing too far with your emojis. The other thing is, I'll stay on that side of the screen. We tend to be very lax about punctuation. If you're on your way to a meeting, you're meeting the client, your colleague is joining you, and the colleague writes this text message, got to the client drawings. There's a huge difference between putting a period at the end of that and putting a question mark. I mean, a huge, like, you know, put the job in jeopardy type difference. Do they mean they're bringing it? Do they mean, are you bringing it? And it's all because we're very lax about our punctuation. And sometimes we don't mean to be, but we get in a rush. And it's just pay attention to that. So it all comes back to proofing. Now, I did put in, I think there's a point in time when if you've got too much to say, a text is not the right thing. You can't put too big of a message. Then you're saying, I've got an email here or a phone call, or I'll wait till I have a face-to-face. I didn't just by chance put in the first sentence of the Gettysburg Address. What's interesting about the Gettysburg Address is that Abraham Lincoln delivered that in less than 2 minutes, and it only has 271 words. So we talk about how to get a message into a brief package, and it's considered one of the most important speeches ever given. And it's a great model of how you can say a ton of things without using a lot of words. Maybe too many words for a text message, but it's certainly a way to trim down a big message and get it into a very compact package that obviously 157 years later still has incredible pertinence to our society today. So I'm just saying, be careful with text. It's a little bit off topic, and we can come back in 10 years and talk about this, but I personally think by the end of this decade, the 20s, I personally think texting will have replaced email. I think email will be a thing of the past. Email will take the role that we now look at US mail I mean, seriously, when's the last time any of you sat down and wrote a letter to a friend or colleague or client and put a stamp on it and mailed it? I think email is headed in that direction. I think texting will actually replace it. I'm not terribly uncomfortable with that. I think with the right care and feeding, it can be a great vehicle for communication. There's a certain George Orwell 1984 newspeak aspect that bugs me a little bit, but that's part of another discussion. But I think this is the burgeoning new age of our regular communication. So that's really everything I wanted to share with you. I'm going to open the floor again to any questions you have.
I
or
have
anything else.
I have a comment about your last point. If you have too much to say, perhaps it's not a text. Sorry about that. What is your opinion of voice memos? I think
Voice-
that, yeah, you know, the voice memo app on your phone, you can
Mhm.
record it and then text it as a recording.
Yeah, I think it's another tool at our disposal. I think that to me, what I like is that you get the inflection of the voice. And you're talking about when you can actually have your voice go through, or it turns into a text.
Yeah, no. It's like getting something on your answering machine.
Yeah.
If I could date myself.
Yeah, no, I remember answering machines too. They were fun. I think it's an added tool, and I think what I'm tempted to say is that I don't think as professionals we exercise all the tools at our disposal. I think we spend too little time saying I know what I want to tell someone, and then we don't think about what's the best vessel to get it there. Yeah, I was just kind of talking tongue in cheek about writing a letter, a handwritten letter on paper. And actually, I think that's still a very effective and viable way to communicate. There's a lot of impact when you write a personal letter to people. Yes, it lacks the immediacy that we have in our other formats or other vehicles, but I just don't feel we exercise all the tools at our disposal. So I would encourage each of us, think about what's the message and what's the vehicle I want to get it there. And that's just another good one that is possible. Georgina, does that kind of answer what you're after?
Yeah, I just, you didn't mention it, and I think it's kind of like brings your whole story a little bit more full circle in terms of the options and how very efficient that mode of communication is as well. That's just my opinion.
I do not disagree. I think that's a good point. And, I'm still a fan of telephone, obviously. There are just so many different ways, so many things are literally at our fingertips.
Yeah.
Well,
like if you're driving, I mean, I don't mean like if you're sitting at your desk and you can't, I'm just saying if you're driving and, it's a good way to get something out real quick without worrying about typing or any of that stuff.
True. Now, for people that dictate messages, which mostly I think would be text, but I know some people that dictate their emails. Wonderful that you can do that, and certainly if you're I see Wendy's driving right now, and so I would definitely. Are you driving or riding? I can't see, but
No, I'm driving, and I want to be able to say something when you take a breath.
Okay, but I don't want to see you pick up your phone and start working your thumbs. But
Okay.
I think for those of you that dictate, just again, be careful. Proofread if you can. I know someone within my family who was a ferocious dictator of emails and text messages. And at the bottom, there's a little thing about this was dictated, so please excuse errors. That's not good enough for me. I think we need to be better as professionals. So, I mean, be very careful if you're doing that. Try to find a way to wait until you can actually proofread it. Weigh that balance of how quick do I have to get this out versus how correct can I make it. And I'm really focused on your professional communication. I'm less concerned about what we do among friends and family.
You need to go somewhere?
But I'm really thinking about the image that we convey professionally. And if we've got, text messages that are garbled or inappropriately framed because autocorrect, or even when we say this was dictated, so please excuse my errors, I think we can do better than that.
And Daryl, in our practice session yesterday with you and Janet and I, there was a lot of other topics. So you're absolutely correct. The recording and sending people your voice with the inflection is one of them. But there were, like you said, Daryl, many, many other tools. We talked about how many links is too many links, that, there's a whole lot of other items when you start talking about professionalism in your communications. And we really decided on this particular session, we were going to keep it to a half an hour, because I kept throwing out more ideas and Daryl kept saying, we got a half hour, we got a half hour. So,
well,
yeah. Go ahead.
So a couple of things that, Wendy's touched on some other things. It's a big topic. In fact, I can tell you once a semester at Loyola, the executive education department, I do a 3-day course just on all of this. And in fact, I'll put the link on the website. It's in October 13 through 15. But obviously, it's a big topic. We spend a lot of time on really taking deep dives into a lot of this stuff, and a little bit of public speaking as well, not just on written communications. But one other topic that I'll throw out there that just to get you thinking about it is how you organize your data. And we saw Mitch, I wrote that, so he's rambling from left to right, up and down. But when you think about your audience, what that particular audience person needs versus someone else, it may be two different things. So when you think about how do I want to structure my email, even if you're going to go beyond the EOM, you say, I really need to say more, and that's fine. Don't think that every communication has to be just a little burst and end with an EOM. But you really want to think about what's the most important thing that person needs to know. It may not be the most important piece of information that you have, but it might be the most important thing for them. And always try to kind of shape it that way. So that pyramid should really not so much be based on your thinking or your brain, but on their brain, and what do you think they need. And so that's just one other tidbit to think about. But I tell you, if you do go back, if you look at your emails, see how they read from the bottom up, yours and others. And when you find one from others, share your experience. Depending on your relationship, if you can offer some coaching, like I was in a webinar and we talked about this, and it turns out that people think from the bottom up, share that with them. And then certainly try to practice it yourself. What other questions can I answer? We have just a few minutes, and then we'll let you get back to your email constructions.
Can I make a recommendation that if there were other topics on this same professional communications level that you would love to talk about or to have another session about, throw them in the chat, and Janet will take those notes and we'll look at it later. Because like I said, we could literally have taken longer. We could do more sessions. We could do different things, but there's a lot of, options here. And we just wanted to just take 30 minutes, get to touch base with everyone. Let everyone know that we're here. We care about you. We want to share. And if any of you feel like you could teach a session and you want to reach out to Wendy, that's me, reach out to me. I know Garen, who was on the call earlier, I'm not sure if he's still here, is teaching a session on Thursday, more geared towards Lutron and lighting your environment to be more of a daylight lighting. So that'll be really fun next Thursday. And I know, Daryl, you have other sessions coming up as well with PowerHouse Smart. So we really appreciate you always taking time out of your busy business schedule to share with everyone. I thank you again.
Thank you. Great to work with everybody. Best of luck to everybody, and let's stay in touch.
Okay. Any other chats that we need to address, Janet? She's on mute, I believe. Okay, well.
This is Mark Benner. I was just going to share kind of along the same topic. I'm in the midst of reading a book called Dreyer's English by Benjamin Dreyer. He's a copy editor from the New York Times, and it's a really in-depth read, but it's the subtitle on the book is An Utterly Correct Guide to Clarity and Style, and it's a really great return to focusing on clarity and communication. I've been really enjoying it.
Mark, one more time, the author?
The author is Benjamin Dreyer. And I'll put it in text as well.
Throw that in the chat. Throw that in the chat. That'd be great. Yeah, Mark, you're always doing great things too. You're always sharing. That's great. I'm sorry, who else was going to say something?
I just asked if it was Dreyer.
Yes.
Dreyer, yeah.
Thanks, Terry. Okay.
Another topic that was suggested is how to get better attention when sending a cold email.
Yeah, we could definitely address that.
Mhm.
That's more of on the marketing side, and I'm sure Daryl could share a lot of insight. I could share some insight. So absolutely, that would be a great topic. And so make sure if you want to be involved in the presentation of these topics, or you want to just be a participant, make sure you denote that in your chat. And we do take note, and we're always available. You can just email, or everyone knows that you can reach me at any time. So great talking to you all. Wishing you a very safe, wonderful rest of the day. Enjoy the sunshine. I heard it's supposed to rain, but it's sunny out.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Daryl. All right, take
Thank
care.
you. Take
You.
care. Bye-bye.
Bye now.